Welcome everyone to another episode of Fireside Streams. My name is Lilly Berelovich. I'm the president and co-founder of Fashion Snoops. And today I am beyond excited to interview Olga Naiman, who is a dear, dear friend, completely disclosing that we'll be talking as girlfriends. But to just share a little bit about Olga, for 25 years, Olga Naiman had a design career that has covered a broad gamut. She has been an editor for House Beautiful magazine, a longtime stylist for Domino magazine, as well as an interior designer. Her apartment, I have had the honor of seeing, has been featured in Domino magazine and Vogue. She has a BA in clinical psychology and has explored all strata of transformation work, from somatic therapies to plant medicine to meditation to Kabbalah. Based on the intersection of interior design, psychology, and manifestation, she created Spatial Alchemy, which we'll be talking about today. And in a recent article about Olga's design philosophy, the Washington Post called her a design therapist. Olga is in the process of writing a book on spatial alchemy, and that will be published by Artisan Books in October 2023. Welcome, Olga. So good to finally have you.
I am so happy to be here.
The team has been so inspired by your work. We featured you in so many different reports, in our the Future of Home report and our wellness report, and a lot of our visionary stories. They were inspired by the world that you have created. And before we dive in, can you do a little intro about spatial alchemy?
Okay, so Spatial Alchemy is a system that I created, and it lies at the intersection of psychology, interior design, and manifestation. And it's really based on the fact that you and your home are in a symbiotic relationship. And when your home shifts, you shift. When your home upgrades, you upgrade. So it's really that your home is a reflection of your psyche. So you can begin to work your home and align it more to your future self, the part of you that you want to step into. And that's really the basis behind it. And that's where I work on with clients, because it's like you have the beauty and the function of home, but then there are other unseen layers, energetic layers, emotional layers in your home that you want to start becoming aware of, so you can begin to use your home as a tool. So that's really where the juice is for me, using people's homes and other spaces as tools for them to step into what they want to step into.
That's amazing. I think that the piece that we have been exploring, which you perfectly aligned in the conversation, is we've been exploring how important it is to turn your home into your sanctuary. I know that in the moment we have been stuck in our homes for 2 years, but now we're venturing out. But at the same time, just the importance of wellness is focused around, how we heal ourselves everywhere. And the home is a primary space for healing. I know you work with a lot of clients who, come to you to turn their spaces into sanctuary spaces. So say a little bit about what that means to even refer to a home as a sanctuary space. Why is it more important than ever now?
It's an interesting thing. I mean, the sanctuary, the home is many things. One of them is a sanctuary, and it's a very important thing to bring into one's awareness. So the sanctuary, I call it like, it really holds the emotional body. It holds the emotional system. The sanctuary part is where you begin to rest the body, where you begin to become aware of the body, even in the home, because we live very mental lives and we're always a bit ahead of ourselves. So if you don't have a home in which you can really embody like your more passive contemplative side and dig into yourself from a juicy space, then you're missing a great opportunity. So sanctuary is one of the facets that I work on. That's kind of the passive spaces in your home. How do you take care of yourself? How do you take care of your body? What does your bathroom feel like? What's your bedroom feeling like? Is it encouraging the intimacy that you say you want? Or is it actually like more of an active space that doesn't really allow the mind and the body to rest? So that's where we speak about sanctuary. Like, is there a space in your living room that's not focused all on the television? Like, is there a space that really allows you to step into a deeper dialogue with yourself, like a contemplation with yourself? So where you're not fully distracted. Have you created a space like that in your home, in your living room? That is the sanctuary part, but there's also the laboratory part. Your home is your laboratory as well, because you can start to begin to play with the arrangements of specific objects, the symbols that specific objects take to really enter into a dialogue with your future self. So there's so many facets to home, and sanctuary is definitely one of them.
I dove in too quickly because I got excited. I want to backtrack 2 steps and talk about how you got here, because I mean, I've been part of your journey, so I know how you got here, but I want the rest of the, you know, the listeners to hear how you got here. And we often talk about, you know, the no longer needing to separate who we are in the world on a daily basis and who we are in our work and the work that we bring to this world. And I know it took me many years, and you've been by my side as I blended those 2 realities together, my spiritual curiosity and what I do at FS. How did you get here? How did you go from a very, you know, corporate design centric, designing, you know, beautiful sets, and to this space that I know mixes what you love about humanity and spirituality into the physical form?
Yeah, I started my career very much in that design-oriented space. So I started my career right out of college. I got a bachelor's degree in psychology, but then I decided that I wanted to be in the world of design, the world of beauty. And I got a job at House Beautiful as an assistant and worked my way up the ladder there to an editor, and was creating beautiful stories, was on amazing photo shoots for the best designers in the country, going all over the place, putting my body into these incredible multi-million-dollar homes all over the country. And that was an education in itself. Like, what does the body feel like when it is in a space that is completely calibrated to beauty? So I got that level of education. And then I was a stylist for Domino Magazine. So again, for many, many years, on a lot of shoots, seeing a lot of spaces, and I started creating spaces myself for my own clients. So there's that side of my background. And then at the same time, I was on like a personal journey, healing myself from, like, you know, being a Ukrainian refugee from the 70s, like coming to the United States, like all the trauma. So I was really in a space of like doing everything that worked. Like, I explored everything. I opened every single door, from plant medicine to somatic therapies to psychotherapy. My parents are both psychiatrists, so I started there. But then I realized that's one side of how you can do it. And then that's the mental part. And that's really important. But then there's also the body, the spirit. And I brought all of those into play simultaneously. And that's when the power really started happening. That's when I started moving my life from a very different perspective, opening my awareness, opening the awareness that we're not just mental beings, you know, and that if you adjust a few things in the head, then everything's going to be okay, that we get into these loops over and over again. And how do you stop that? So I found those ways for myself. And then, like a bit before COVID, it started coming together, because before, the design world was over here and it was all about beauty and function and creativity and how things make you feel. And then, but it didn't really talk about energy. You know, that was the thing that was missing from the conversation, as well as manifestation. Like, how do we create homes that are more calibrated to what we want to step into? than like the pieces of ourselves that we're trying to let go of. So then it started coming closer and closer and closer. And as I started working the spiritual angle, it came together during COVID really profoundly for me. Because I was like, the home is everything. It really is everything because it became everything. And you can start working with it as a tool. And that was a big turnaround for me. And then, you know, my client, I started bringing that into my client conversations, and then magic started happening in their lives. Like they started to really get it. And then the Washington Post wrote an article about me doing that, because a lot of the clients are calling that energy a pretty magical energy once you start aligning your physical space. And that's one thing the law of attraction doesn't talk about. So that's how it came in for me.
That's awesome. You touched on something that I want to spend a little bit more time on. You touched on energetic, you know, I guess playing with energy or understanding energy or taking energy into account as we build, you know, product design, spaces, etc. We've been talking a lot about elemental healing, elemental, just seeing the elemental energy almost like another ingredient that you add into the design equation. Now, it's harder to see it, you know, if I think about a mushroom or if I think about, you know, any kind of other ingredients that I'm putting in or a specific fabric, that's easy. But when we tell some of our clients and the companies we work with about there's also energetic elements that are needing to be considered, and also that I think humanity or people are already understanding this. They are already questioning, you know, how elemental, energetic and elemental, you know, influence is being integrated into their lives. So say a little bit more about that, because it's such a hard thing to formulate. You know, you're speaking to an audience of creatives that create product. Mm-hmm. You know, all ranges from, you know, elements for their home or accessories for their home or fashion or beauty and, you know, all the ranges. And when we say you need to consider the energetic field of, you know, even the material you choose or the ingredients you choose, it's harder for them to grasp. They don't know what to do with that information, or they don't know yet what to do with that information. So can you add some brilliance there?
What I want to say is there are that level of awareness, and that is a question of awareness, is inside of everybody. We can like really access that level of awareness. So like when you kind of talk about putting the energetics, I call it putting the energetic realm online, and just becoming more and more proficient at something that's already inside of you. You know, it's kind of like, what is the energy? Like, think of what is the energy of metal as opposed to the energy of wood. Like just even some basic things when I'm styling an interior, when I'm creating, I'm designing, think of like, what is the energy of wood doing for the body? The energy of wood is stable. Like think of like the trunk, the roots in the tree and how the tree grows. It's really of the earth. It has like a more earthbound energy because of that thing is inside the ground. And then when you think of metal, also inside the ground, but it's a more almost, wood is richer and metal has a more like a focused kind of quality to it. It's like more, it's a harder material. So think of how that makes your body feel. Imagine if you were in a room entirely made of wood and what the body would experience. Always look to the body. That's what I always check in with your body. And that's really the pathway, I believe, to the energy. So what would your body experience inside a room made entirely of wood, and feel how that kind of, it activates your lower chakra system, your legs, your pelvis, everything is activated because of the pull of the roots. And then imagine yourself in a room made entirely of metals. The walls are metal. And think of what that does to your body. It almost begins to vibrate on a higher kind of frequency, like it's kind of vibrating with metal, depending on what the metal is. Imagine a room made of pure gold, you know? So when you start working with elements, start imagining yourself in a room entirely surrounded by that element. And then the body starts beginning to respond. And that's your pathway, I would say. That's
so
a simple
good.
way.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good to have us tune in to the energetic sensory that each of us can pick up on, even, you know, closing our eyes and saying, okay, the energy of wood or metal. I love that. And it goes on. And I think the more we become proficient with it, or even start to recognize it and be more alert to it, I think the more we get, we'll either gravitate or not gravitate towards a certain material or component or shape, because it's, you know, I feel like we are all waking up. You know, and I think that our radars are becoming less asleep to those layers of frequency and energetic fields that we weren't, or I wouldn't say, I don't want to generalize, but most of us were not picking up on, just because we're on a high speed, you know, we're just running on that treadmill. But the more we slow down and the more we start to connect to ourselves and the more humanity starts to look inside, the more these elements will start to become more and more important in our design and object world, because that's where we as humans connect with energy. So I think the example you gave is brilliant. I love that. Let's talk about, you know, we did a beautiful design aesthetic this season. One of our sentiments was called Divine, and we explored sacred spaces. So just like the sacred space of, you know, whether it was temples or churches or any kind of synagogues or any other sacred spaces that in the past were the places where humans came to reconnect to something bigger than themselves. And as you wisely say, that is no longer, you know, a habit of ours anymore. So can you talk about, you know, just how you incorporate, you know, what they knew then that we could now? I know you researched this a lot, and I'm fascinated about how much you love to research, but, you know, we don't have, you know, all the time. And I know you've studied this a lot, but just the highlight of, you know, those sacred spaces and how you're actually working that into what you're doing with homes.
Yeah, no, this is one of my favorite topics, because before we used to put our bodies in sacred spaces at least once a week. Think about like 100 years ago. We would go into churches, we would go into synagogues, mosques, and our bodies would respond. Imagine crossing the threshold to a beautifully designed church, and it's literally calibrated to affect the body with certain symbols, certain codes. It's actually programmed to do it. It works not only on the body, because we often get goosebumps when we cross the threshold and that air hits us, we get goosebumps, our body responds. So it's working on and it also works on our mind. It opens our mind to the possibility of what lies beyond this physical realm. Like, so immediately you're walking into almost like another dimension, another reality through this experience. It's a powerful experience. And since we've stopped going into these spaces on a regular basis, the most sacred most of us get, you know, or most of like probably your listeners get, are the yoga studios. So we walk into yoga studios, and not really anymore with COVID. Now we're just in our homes, but we're coming back out. So we walk into yoga studios, and that's the most sacred we get. But most yoga studios don't have the same response. That your body is not responding in a yoga studio in the way that it responds to like a beautiful church. When you go to like Europe or some beautiful churches here, you walk in, body responds. So how do you take the energy of that, like conversation, that dialogue with your body, and start implanting it in your home deliberately so that you can program your body to like respond to meaning? Like, we're in a meaning crisis these days where like the God thing got pushed out. You know, we have like kind of meditation, Buddhism, like ascension paths, but no one really we're all walking around a little blind, feeling for our ways. But how do we take the energy of like the sacred and put that into the physical space? So for example, I'll talk about what's behind me. So this is a very powerful symbol. So this is like how you work with symbols to affect your unconscious mind. So this is the symbol of the sun. You see it a lot on icons like bursting out of people's heads. So I am specifically using that behind me to activate that energy in myself, to really tune my body into something that's beyond the physical realm, into like a higher dimensional frequency, one calls it. I mean, that's like, it is woo-woo speak, but it actually really works. So it's the working with symbols. It's the working with like what affects your body and how the like intimate knowledge of your body. That's how you start working with sacred space and bringing these things in the home. And you can start looking at how sacred spaces in your own religious tradition did that, because you're genetically programmed to respond to that. The way your personal tradition did that, those like lineage threads are inside of your body. So when you bring those things into your space, you unconsciously start working with that. So I talk about focal points a lot. So when you walk into your home, for example, what's the first thing you see when you cross your own threshold from the outer world to the inner world? So you're doing a big transition for your body. It's coming from like a more chaotic space out there into a more safe and sacred space. It's like walking into a church. What do you first see when you walk into a place of worship? You see a focal point, and that focal point is specifically programmed with an image. And that image is meant to open your consciousness to see a certain thing. What's your first thing when you walk through your door? How is that programming you? These are the deliberate kinds of things that we can think about. What's the first thing you see when you wake up? How is that programming your day? What's the symbol of that? Is that where is that how you're wanting to program your own brain? So these are the kinds of questions that you start asking yourself when you want to really align with what sacred space does, because that is exactly what it did.
Can you say a little bit more about, so how did they do it? Was there, I know you talk a lot about sacred geometry, which I'm fascinated by. How did they do it? What did they, based on the research, what, in your opinion, did they do in those sacred spaces that resonated so powerfully within our, nervous system and our bodies? What are some of the cues that they integrated into that we could now integrate as well?
Well, there were symbols that are ancient symbols that they really started even before the Egyptians, and the Egyptians began to use them, and then they passed in through the Abrahamic religions and forward. So they started working with those symbols very specifically. For example, the symbol of the cross. A lot of traditions have that, like the Native American tradition. They talk about the shamanic tradition, the 4 directions. It's kind of like as above, so the alchemists say, as above, so below, as within, so without. So as above, so below, the vertical plane. As within, so without, the horizontal plane. So when you bring that, and it's like the number 4, when you bring that into your awareness and you start working with 4s, for example, when you start wanting stability in your life, like more groundedness, if you're someone who's always forgetting things, if you're a little chaotic, if you can't if everything seems very unbalanced and feels like you're juggling a million balls, start rooting yourself. Start working with 4, the number 4. It's a very stable number. Start working with symmetry. So they worked a lot with symmetry. When you think of any sacred space, they're not chaotic. It's very symmetrical. The churches are built on this 4-axis where the strongest point in that church is the center point. When you're standing in the middle of these 4 crossroads, the center point. So center points in each room. So when you work on center points in your home, like what are you seeing and how is it programming the body? So you kind of start working in the way that they did back then. So 4 is a very stable number, wood, 4, like kind of solid objects behind you. I'm working these symbols very much behind me, like the symmetry behind me. And then this bursting sun behind me is very specific and very deliberate. And it's very much how the ancients used to work with it.
So in essence, when we think about energy, it does get activated by real elements, whether it's objects that are placed in a certain way, or the number of objects that are placed in the room, or where the object is placed, how we look at it. So it's not, I think those are the things that, you know, I'm excited for leaders like you and visionaries like you to really put into form, so others could say, oh, it's not just magic, you know, okay, yes, it's magic because it gets activated in a certain way, but it's not just untouchable. It's not something that I can't, you know, tangibly feel or understand. We can, because we get to, you know, you're starting to decode it and others are starting to decode something that feels untangible and make it a little bit more literal and a little more grounded in the way we, you know, understand it. If we lived, you know, hundreds of years ago, we probably wouldn't need this much explanation about sacred space. We walk in, you feel it, you get activated, the job is done. But today, we need a little bit more reality to the intangible.
Yeah, it's like such begins with a body awareness first. So you begin to start relating it through your body. How is it responding? How is it making your body respond? So like, how do you know the difference between what you like and what you don't like? So say that you are doing a gallery wall of art behind you. How do you create something that feels pleasurable? So you're always going towards the pleasure, you know, whatever like feels good to you, to your particular body. If you're doing it for your own home, you always move towards the pleasure, towards what you like. And yes, definitely different objects have different energies. For example, like this glass that I specifically drink water out of, I'm programming my body, like I am like stepping into like higher activation of higher self-worth for myself. So I went around my whole house and looked at everything that I touched daily. So for example, your routines. What does your toothbrush look like? What is the glass that you drink your water out of in the morning? What are your forks and spoons like? What is the plate that you eat from every morning? Like these things that you touch every day, you can begin with that. It's actually a very simple step. Just start looking at your routines. And is that, I call it regal codes. Are those things like do they have the energy? Like the difference between these two glasses, you know, like what's the energy here and what's the energy here? What is the energy that I want to step into? So that's how you start feeling energy. It's actually not as complicated as you think.
Yeah, no, I know. I think let's turn it around a little bit, because I think that I want the people who actually make those cups that we drink to also be aware of this layer of programming that they could have an effect on, you know. So, and you're speaking to people who make products. So let's kind of reverse it and aim the conversation at those who are actually putting objects into the space And if you're saying that there's codes that could be integrated, they could actually be aware of that. Now, not every collection is activating regalness, but some may be. Some collections may be wanting to integrate more calm or more stability or, you know, more coziness or being reconnected. Like all those words actually translate to codes that could be put into objects. And that's what I think I would love for you to shed some light on.
Yes, yes. So say that you're wanting to create stability, like say that you want to kind of create an earthy collection that really helps people ground. So it's really like the slowness and the consideration with which that is created. I mean, and you see that a lot in this kind of handmade ceramic movement that's happening. But then how do you differentiate yourself from like all the beautiful handmade ceramic things? So that's where you start like putting in like the codes is how you feel when you're creating it. It's like using metals, like playing with opposites, like being able to access like the kind of essential quality of materials. You know, it's, I always look to like how, like the historical things. So I find it really powerful to bring history in it or bring a little marker from history that opens people's awareness to that thing, even if it's unconscious. For example, if you put like a metal triangle inside of a beautiful ceramic cup, like at the very bottom. So when someone drinks, the triangle appears. That's like think of like someone actually drinking the thing and then creating a time-based experiential effect where they like drink and then there's like something that appears that wasn't there when the coffee was in that mug. So little touches like that, when you think through the layers of how someone's actually going to be using that, starts differentiating your product and making it really special. And like the regal codes that I spoke of is about activating self-worth in people. So any product that someone, when they pick it up, that they feel more self-worth, they feel more self-worth through the product, they're accessing more self-worth, is a really powerful thing. So it's really how you bring that energy to yourself. And if you figure out how you feel more self-worth by holding your product, chances are someone else is going to pick up on that. Was that
so
clear?
Yeah, totally. And there's so much I want to touch on. I had a different question in mind, but I'm going to reroute a little bit because I think what you're saying, so it's not that difficult. It's actually quite simple. It's just about slowing ourselves down and feeling the energy field of anything around us, right? Mm-hmm. So now, and this is, you know, a topic that I'm the most passionate about because the designers and who we are as creators, the ones who actually put product into the world. If we don't actually feel ourselves and our inner energetic field as we're creating these objects, then everything you're saying, we kind of lose it. Then we'll just put a triangle there. It'll mean nothing and everyone will miss the whole thing. I mean, when they were building those churches and mosques and you know, synagogues, they were spiritually connected to who they are. They knew where to place those symbols because they could feel the difference between putting it in here and putting it here. And right now, a lot of us, the creatives, are not, you know, not feeling ourselves, not of creating objects is so quick. We don't even have time to sit there like you do. Okay, which cup brings me more joy? We don't have time to do that. And I think that that's the first place to start. I've been thinking a lot about this, and you know, I use this example. It's like the most basic thing I could think of. But you know how you buy eggs and it says these, you know, chickens were grass-fed and therefore you have better eggs. And we're like, oh, great. No one's talking to us about the people who are actually creating the product. They're not saying, you know, behind this collection are the most loving, heart-open individuals who every day are so excited to make this cup for you and feel everything about the texture and energetic feel of the object that they want you to have in your home. That's not happening enough. Maybe it is, but it's not happening enough in our reality. Say a little bit about, what you feel is missing in the creative, or for us creatives, and not to bash us or anything, but just to say, what do we need in order to create these, objects that matter?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a really powerful question. So I feel like the first thing is really, there's like, the things that bring us the most pleasure are things that you feel the hand of the maker in, and like the energy of the maker. So when I create, or when I'm making objects, I'm always thinking, like, I forget about the trends and what else everybody is doing, and really focus in on, like, what is it that makes me feel good, that makes me like, that brings in like a level of heart and humanity into the piece. Because if people feel my heart through the object, it's almost like a silent dialogue from the object, from me to whoever the end user is, like the end consumer is. So it's like, I think it's a self-awareness. It's like, if something moves you bodily, chances are it will move other people. If something like gives you that, like, so try to create things with as deliciously as possible, in terms of like, what is even more pleasure? How can I put even more pleasure? How can I create even more communication through that object, so that it feels like it's like that like grass-fed chicken, So it's because like the project, or the product itself has been like almost bathed in somebody's awareness. And you can tell when a product, or when a thing, you take a dress off the rack and it's been bathed in someone's awareness, even if it's made in a factory, the awareness came at the design level. So it's really about like creating meaning beyond the physical object itself. And it's activating that meaning portal. I would say that would be the greatest thing, of like how you like create meaning through symbol, and like have that meaning touch the consumer.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of work to be done there. And I think for all of us, I think time and slowing ourselves down as we create, as we concept, as we consider, as we feel material, as we touch the ideas that we're putting together, just slowing ourselves down and feeling more into what we're making, as opposed to thinking more into what we're making. I think the thinking we've mastered. The feeling more into what we're making is, I think, a big miss, and I think it's gonna become more and more evident, like you said, the objects that do have that heart behind them and the objects that don't. So yeah, more to. I think we could probably spend 3 hours on just that. I want to just touch on one more topic before we wrap up. I mean, I wish I had 5 hours with you, but. As I said, our audience still has to get a lot done, and just spending the time listening to a great conversation doesn't always fit into our hectic days, unfortunately. But I want to talk, I know you're passionate about rethinking public spaces, not public, business spaces, whether it's offices or stores, retail, experiences. All of that is changing, as you very much know. What do what's your input there in what do you think designers, or what can you activate in some of those spaces where people are now going to start coming together again And we are rethinking, you know, why come to an office? What's important in an office right now? Why come to a store? What's important to feel or experience there? What can we start to integrate on an energetic level into those spaces?
Yeah, it's a powerful thing, that coming together of the collective, of whatever collective that you're bringing together, and then the group consciousness and what that group consciousness is creating for the larger society. So it's really how you take meaning, again, how you take the meaning and start putting it into the objects. So because objects and colors and shapes speak in a nonverbal language. And so through in this, the nonverbal language of larger spaces can be coded with a lot of warmth. I feel like in the last, like, you know, of 50 years, there's been a lot of like kind of coolness and functionality and efficiency in design. And while that's really important, it's really the beauty and the kind of harmonization of the bodies, of like, so that each body feels actually really emotionally supported and held and brought together in common meaning, but from a more right brain side. So people are really tapping into what their values are, and even beyond value, it's kind of what their purposes are. So if you start really activating office spaces, and this is what I'm loving doing, as if they were churches or as if they were like healing spaces, you start activating the body and inspiring people in a different way. And that's like, for me, those layers are the most exciting layers, because we didn't really do that in the past with cubicles and like those awful lights that came up from the top that made everyone look green and blue. You know, it was like a very anti-body. It was a very kind of like leaning towards maximum efficiency space, but people don't want to be in that space, because we're not like cogs, you know, we want to be held in a different way and brought together in a different way. So these are the questions that I'm really sitting in with the public spaces these days.
So is it also about decoding or, you know, or recoding that space to be more connected to what the humans will need in that environment? Is that what you mean?
Yes, like emotional support spaces, just even spaces that people could take a time out in. And that like there's a room that's like a darkened room, maybe with soft furniture, that people can like, between meetings, you kind of usually go, you start your day and you're like meeting. There's like no space in between to even pause and like connect to like, what is the meaning behind all these meetings? Like, what am I actually wanting to bring into all these meetings? So even having a room, like a darkened room that has sofas and chaises, so, and like no technology, so that people could sit and like kind of realign their bodies, come back to themselves. Even just that idea alone, like, and that they're encouraged to do so that there is space in their day. They're encouraged to take 5-10 minutes between their meetings in that room to really connect to what it is they're wanting to bring in through their meetings. What are they wanting to emanate through their meetings? Like examples like that.
Awesome. Great. Well, let's, I want to hear about some of the exciting projects you're working on now and before we complete. So what's down I know the book's coming, which is exciting. What else?
Yeah, so I'm loving writing the book, because in it I'm interviewing people from like Jungian analysts to shamans to numerologists, and really bringing that together into interior design or into spatial alchemy. So that's really exciting. And then that is informing these healing spaces that I'm working with. Like there's one project with ketamine that I'm working with, and trying to calibrate like what is a space that the body can completely open in to receive like the next level upgrades, the next level of expansion that's meant for you. So how do spaces encourage like next level expansion? And that is super exciting. That's really at the core of everything I do. Calibrating yourself or your space for human expansion. You know, it touches my heart deeply.
That's awesome, Olga. Well, I think there's a lot of exciting, you know, explanations and also decoding that you're going to be providing for all of us in the next few years. And I think anyone who's interested in recoding their office space, their retail space, even their home space, or even recoding, decoding their objects that they're creating, I think you would be an amazing collaborator for that reality. I think as everyone questions how we do it, I think you've definitely formulated a lot of the layers that are still very esoteric or very untouchable or unapproachable for most of us. So thank you for breaking it down for the rest of the world, and your curiosity. Your curiosity makes it easier on the rest of us. And thank you for sharing your insight with us today. Anything else you want to say before we close up?
I feel complete. I feel really good, and I'm excited for people to really take in the energetic realm and kind of not put it on a pedestal. You know, it is inside of you. It lives inside of your body. It's not this foreign thing out there. It's like so part of you. And that's what I'm seeing more and more in people's design, in products. And that is a really exciting space to live in.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you, my dear Olga. Thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Good luck with all of it.
My pleasure. Thank you.